afternoon, everyone. This is the Joint Financial Regulatory Agency's stakeholder meeting to discuss home equity lending interpretation amendments on the definition of business day. My name is Matt Nance, and I'm the Office of Consumer Credit Commissioner's Deputy General Counsel. I'm joined by several members of the Finance Agency's staff. From the OCCC, we have Commissioner Leslie Pettyjohn and Assistant General Counsel Audrey Spalding, as well as the OCCC's Senior Paralegal Ginger Harmon, who's acting as our organizer for our meeting. From the Credit Union Department, we have Credit Union Commissioner John Kohlhoff and General Counsel Nancy Elmalady. From the Department of Banking, we have Senior Counsel Everett Jobe. And from the Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending, we have Associate General Counsel Ian Berry and Director of Mortgage Regulation William Purse. We're holding this meeting through an online webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Getting input from stakeholders is a really important part of the rulemaking process, and these meetings help us make sure we produce the best rules possible. Our webinar platform is GoToWebinar. Some of you might be listening on your phones, some may be watching on your computers, and some may be doing both. For those watching on your computer, there's a window where you can submit questions, and if you have technical questions about using the webinar, you can type them in and Ginger will try to answer those. We're discussing a pre-comment draft of rule amendments that's available on the OCCC's webpage for recent and upcoming rules. On that webpage, you can see the draft rules by clicking on the link for home equity business day definition. If you have any comments on the rule amendments, go ahead and type those in at any time, and I'll be getting to those. And if you're on a computer with a mic, there's a function allowing you to raise your hand, and we can let you make a comment verbally. So I'd like to first summarize our draft amendments and then lay out the proposed timeline, and then you'll have a chance to provide verbal comments. So these are amendments to the interpretations of the Texas Constitution contained in Title VII, Chapter 153 of the Texas Administrative Code. Specifically, these amendments are in Section 153.1, the definition section of the interpretations. The amendments deal primarily with the definition of business day. We're amending a few other definitions, but those are really technical corrections for consistent capitalization. So the Constitution's home equity section uses the term business day in two different provisions. First, Section 50A6M2 says that the pre-closing disclosure has to be provided at least one business day before closing, with an exception for bona fide emergencies. And second, Section 50F2D says when a lender is refinancing a home equity loan into a non-home equity loan, the lender has to provide the refinance disclosure within 3 business days after the homeowner submits a loan application. So in looking at how to interpret the term business day in these provisions, the draft interpretation amendments would do two things. One, they'd add Juneteenth, National Independence Day, to the list of public holidays that aren't considered business days. And two, they'd include an additional definition of business day to ensure that the timing of the refinance disclosure aligns with requirements under federal law. So here's the text of the first definition. Again, this would apply for purposes of the one-day pre-closing disclosure requirement. It's similar to the business day definition currently in 153.1, but we'd add a reference to Juneteenth, which was designated as a legal holiday in 2021, and a reference to the federal statute listing legal public holidays. So similar to the current definition in 153.1, this is listing out legal public holidays that are excluded, and a business day is all calendar days except Sundays and the listed legal public holidays. Here's part of the text of the second definition. This would apply for purposes of the 3-day refinance disclosure requirement. This definition is based more on when the lender's offices are open and would ensure that deadlines for providing the refinance disclosures align with the early disclosures under Federal Regulation Z. So we're really interested in stakeholder feedback on these definitions. The concept of having 2 different business day definitions that apply in different contexts has existed in federal rules for some time, specifically the definition section of Regulation Z, 12 CFR 1026.2. So we're interested in whether these definitions reflect stakeholders' understanding of the term business day and what would be the costs or benefits of this approach. So that's the summary of our pre-comment draft amendments. Here's a tentative timeline for the amendments. You can see that we're requesting informal pre-comments by January 19th. We intend to propose the amendments at the February and March Finance Commission and Credit Union Commission meetings. There would be an official comment period during the months of March and April. We'd present the rules for adoption to the commissions in June, and the amendments would be effective in early July. This is a tentative timeline, and of course, all interpretation amendments are subject to final approval by the commissions. Now, you might be wondering whether the amendments will be effective on Juneteenth, 2022. I don't anticipate the amendments will be effective by June 19th based on commission meeting dates and statutory requirements for when rules can be effective. However, June 19th, 2022 happens to fall on a Sunday, and the current text of 153.1 already excludes Sundays from the definition of business day. So it's our understanding that Juneteenth 2022 would be excluded from the current definition because it happens to fall on a Sunday. So with that, I have summarized this rule action, and I will open things up to comments on the draft interpretation amendments. Again, there are two ways to provide your feedback through this webinar. First, you can type your comment out and send it to us through the webinar's question feature, or if you're on a computer with a mic, there should be a function allowing you to raise your hand. And if you want to type out a longer question and want to get in kind of a quick message that you're typing out a longer question, feel free to send a short message through the question feature saying you have a question that you're typing out. So, Ginger, do we have any written questions or comments through the webinar or any raised hands?
No questions or hand raises at this time.
Okay. Again, if you have a longer question, feel free to type out a brief statement through the question feature and send that in. Or feel free to use the raise hand feature and then we can unmute you to make a verbal comment. Okay, I'm still not seeing any questions. I do want to make sure we have an opportunity for verbal feedback. So I will go ahead and wait for 1 minute starting now just to see if we get any other questions or hand raises. Oh, we have a hand raise from Karen Neely. Ginger, could you unmute Ms. Neely?
Thanks. Actually, Juneteenth is on Sunday, but when it's on Sunday, it's observed on Monday.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Yeah, that's an interesting point about observed holidays. So I'm curious to see if anyone has any comments about observed holidays. Or whether, would stakeholders interpret these amendments to apply to observed holidays? As drafted, these amendments don't exclude I'm not sure they exclude observed holidays when you observe them on Monday. So anyway, Karen, do you have other thoughts on that, whether that should warrant some sort of change to this language or how you interpret the language?
It needs clarity because that's true for any of the July 4th, the Christmas, the Juneteenth. There are several ones that are on a particular day, but then they can be observed on, and if it's Sunday, then they're observed on Monday. And we need to know.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, this is a good opportunity for us to get more information about that. And Karen, if you wouldn't mind, including something in a comment if you're planning to file it, or if you have any suggested text that would clarify that point, that would be good to know.
Great, thanks. And yeah, and we do like these amendments, by the way. We're very, very pleased on this initiative.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Karen, I was going to ask you, is this consistent with how your members understand what a business day is when you're kind of thinking about how to interpret that term?
Yeah, and that's always been tricky because there's always been these two definitions in TILA, one for right of rescission and one for everything else, and then we got TRID and the special, real estate ones, and so it's always been kind of a mess knowing what is a business day. So this is really a critical definition, and we're very, very happy that you all are working on making this more consistent with what we do for TILA and TRID generally. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, we have another hand raised from David Puente. Ginger, could you unmute Mr. Puente?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Can you go back a slide? I wanted to just ask you a clarification on the previous 3-day business day. One more slide before previous to that, please. Yeah, purposes of a day on which the lender's offices are open to the public for carrying on substantially all of its business functions. So when the offices are via phone services, that's not considered carrying on substantially all business functions, even though there's a lot of business functions that happen via the phone. Is that assumed in that? Because there's days that that on days of the week that those can be actually done outside of the via the phone. So because we're going more to like a a way of being more accessible via the phone rather than just in office.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question, and that gets into we're really interested in how this affects how this kind of intersects with operations, especially remote operations.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked and borrowed a little bit of language from Regulation Z, again with the idea that it seems like this is how the industry understands this term, kind of consistently with the federal law. We did have some additional clarifying text about this kind of business function definition, and yeah, so our draft has a couple of additional clarifying sentences. Mr. Puente, could you, so do I understand correct that you have days when the kind of phone lines are open, but physical offices are not open?
Correct. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, with the business models, how they're all changing so rapidly with COVID and the workforce, and there possibly be days that maybe now, how you're seeing lobbies being shut down and now it's just drive-through services. Sometimes rather than working a Monday through Friday work week, you're doing a Monday through Monday, Tuesday, off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The model just continues to change. So I think as long as there's the language in there that says your locations have to be physically open, I guess is kind of my comment there on that. And I wanted to make sure that on this definition that you have here, that it's stating that. Does that make sense?
Okay, so kind of a physical office. Okay. Now home. Well, yeah, we're interested in this definition is in the context, right, of refinancing a home equity loan into a non-home equity loan. So yeah, we'd be interested in learning, like, how do, where is that type of loan closed? How do lenders do that? What are some different, um, business structures that lenders have? In light of the pandemic, we're really interested in kind of work from remote locations or ways to vary from the typical model of just in-person business at the location. Although for home equity loans, right, there is a closing location requirement.
Correct.
But yeah, we'd definitely be interested in gathering some of that information about how different lenders do it, because we want to make sure this definition is going to work, not just for one business model or one way of doing things, but for how lenders in Texas make these loans.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a question from Darlene Hilton. For the second definition, if we have a company event and the office is closed, would this constitute a closed if we do notification prior to the event via lobby notification and statements? So that's an interesting question. Again, this is a business function test based on federal law. I'd have to take a look at some of these questions. I can't really necessarily speak to how all of these would be applied, but if the definitions say what they say, if stakeholders think that additional issues should be addressed or described in the rule, I'd encourage, and you have some recommendations for additional text for the definitions, I'd encourage you to include those in an informal pre-comment. But moving to this business function tests it requires kind of an evaluation of the facts of whether the lenders' offices are open to the public for carrying on substantially all of their business functions. It's kind of more of a functional test that looks at the facts of what's going on and whether that definition is satisfied. So if that definition would just create like more confusion and lenders would kind of wonder about how to apply that, we'd like to know that. We want to know any benefits and drawbacks of amending these definitions. Okay, we have a hand raise from, and sorry if I mispronounce this, but Michael Fraschilla. Ginger, could you unmute Michael?
Mr. Fraschilla, you're unmuted. Mr. Fraschilla, can you hear us? We are unable to hear you, Mr. Fraschilla. Matt, I think Mr. Fraschilla is working out some audio issues. Yes, his audio is down. Mr. Fraschilla, if you would like to try and get out of the webinar and then try and join again, sometimes that fixes audio issues pretty easily. You're welcome. Matt, other than Mr. Frischilla, we do not have any other questions or hand raises at this time.
Okay, well, we can wait a couple more minutes and see if we get additional questions, and yeah, provide him a moment to log out, log back in. That addresses the issue.
Okay, thank you.
So William Purse, my fellow panelist, has sent me a chat reminding me that the commentary to Regulation Z, when it talks about observed holidays, says that those are not excluded from business days. For example, if July 4th fell on a Saturday and Friday, July 3rd was the observed holiday, Friday, July 3rd would still be considered a business day, for what that's worth. But yeah, we definitely welcome further comment if there is any on that observed holiday question. We have a hand raised from Elvis Awaha. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Ginger, could you unmute?
I think she just did. So Michael is my boss. I'm just gonna let him ask the question through my phone. Is that okay?
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right, Michael, go ahead slowly.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My concern was the way that this is starting to sound is that we're going to have a situation where multiple financial institutions have multiple days throughout the year. There's no uniformity in what is a business day throughout the entire year for all financial institutions. So I want to make sure that that's at least acknowledged, that we understand that as a group that could potentially happen. And I think the point that was just brought up about the Reg Z issue kind of meets to that. If we're defining when people are open and when they're closed, as far as the business days being left to the institutions, there could be days where we're open where, for example, the county offices may not be open, and it seems to me that then we're not fully able to do the most primary business of closing loans during the time of a rescission, at the end of a rescission period. If we're open for business and the county offices are not open to be able to do the primary focus of the job of the real estate department, which is either attaching or releasing liens as part of their everyday work.
Okay, and do you have a sense of and yeah, those are really good points to consider. Do you have a sense in the context of providing these disclosures where you have these two disclosure requirements, right? Where the pre-closing disclosure has to be at least one business day before closing. It could be more than one business day, right? You could close the loan 5 business days after you provide the pre-closing disclosure. You have that requirement on the one hand. And then you also have this other requirement of the refinance disclosure that needs to be provided at most 3 business days after the loan application. Do you have a sense of how that affects your business trying to comply with those deadlines?
To be truthful, I don't know that it's been an issue that we've had. Elvis might be able to speak to that faster than I could in terms of getting a definitive answer, but the thought process is just one of functionally making sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position that we're defining ourselves as open for business when we're not truly open for business if we're unable to do some of the primary functions of the real estate department.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again,
that you could have some type of language that, except we're otherwise preempted by, by federal holiday or state holiday, or some language that provide. I mean, COVID was a good example of that. It gave exceptions that we never normally had, or the possibility of exceptions that we normally never had. Is that a possibility that the state might look at?
Well, I think what we want to make sure we understand kind of the textual implications of this, right? How do lenders understand that phrase, business day? What do lenders understand that to mean? So we're interested in getting, feedback on that, what lenders understand a business day to be, and then also kind of the policy implications for these requirements, right? What are going to be the benefits, the drawbacks, the things that enhance compliance and consumers' ability to review these disclosures, and what are the drawbacks? So,
let's try and take an example real quick. I'll try and finish up as a point. When it comes to, let's say, Reg CC, it used to be rather easy with Reg CC as an example, that if the Fed was open, it didn't matter whether you were open or closed. It was still considered a business day because the Fed was open for business that day. I guess what I'm driving at is we can say we're open or closed for business, but there might be some definitive examples, whether it's a holiday through the state or the Fed or some other reason that creates a situation where we're not able to do the job that we would normally do as that part of our lending department in relationship to the 3-day period. And that's all I want to at least have as a thought process about this.
Do you have a preference for one of those? So there are kind of two different types of definitions, right? The first definition is more objective in the sense that it excludes calendars that you can, see, or it excludes days you can see on the calendar and know definitively in advance that, okay, this set of days are excluded. I know that it's uniform. The second test is more functional and might vary from lender to lender. Federal law has used both of those types of definitions for different contexts and different types of disclosures. But is there a preference for one of those types of definitions? Should we just stick with one of them or the other?
Well, I would lean towards A with some kind of additional statement, perhaps, about saying, or any other days in which county recording offices may or may not be may be closed, because obviously, like I said, the other definition tries to lead into what you do during the course of your day is, are you substantially involved in doing your job? Well, if you can't record and you can't release liens, you're substantially impaired in terms of being able to do your job. So A with some kind of caveat regarding the item, situations where the county offices or the recording offices may be closed, might be, if I could make a suggestion, that might be my ideal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other written comments or hand raises?
No questions or hand raises from the attendees at this time.
Okay. Well, this is a really good discussion. I do want to make sure that anyone who wants to has a chance to provide verbal feedback. I'm going to go ahead and wait one more minute just to see if we get any more comments or hand raises. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more hand raises or questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our presentations. If you have a last minute hand raise or question, go ahead and type in something quick, but I will begin wrapping up. Okay, with that, I've summarized our rule action. I want to thank everyone for joining us and participating. Rule updates on this particular rule action will be available on the OCCC's website, and we'll also be posting the audio of this meeting. We are accepting written pre-comments on these rules until 5:00 p.m. next Wednesday, January 19th. Our posted draft has a lot of the questions we're interested in, which are, some of the things I mentioned earlier. How do businesses understand what a business day is? How do they comply with these requirements? Has that changed during the pandemic with, remote operations? We're really interested in learning about all those issues, particularly as they relate to these two disclosure requirements and figuring out how we can understand what a business day is for purposes of these constitutional requirements. So yeah, please email any written pre-comments to me by 5 p.m. next Wednesday, January 19th at rule.comments@occc.texas.gov, which is our email address for rule comments. Thank you all for attending. Please be safe out there, and we will see you next time. Thank you.